Welcome to Echo of Crime YouTube channel. Gerald, Missouri was the kind of town where everybody knew everybody. A quiet place, one grocery store, a diner where the same families sat in the same booths, and a police department small enough that every officer recognized every face on Main Street. Life moved slowly there, so when a stranger arrived, people noticed. And when that stranger presented himself with authority, real or not, they listened. His name was Bill Jakob, and the day he came to Gerald, he introduced himself not as a visitor, not as a passerby, but as a federal agent. He drove a dark vehicle with tinted windows. He wore tactical boots and a vest that looked official. He carried a badge that glinted under the Missouri sun, one that said everything without explaining anything. And he spoke with confidence. Confidence was key. He didn't ask for permission. He assumed command. He walked into the local police station and announced that he was part of a multi-agency narcotics task force assigned to help clean up small towns facing drug problems. Gerald, like many rural towns at that time, had struggled with methamphetamine use. Rumors, arrests, whispers, nothing massive, but enough to make law enforcement feel overwhelmed and under-resourced. So when Jacob appeared, claiming to be the help they needed, Gerald welcomed him. A hero in the making. Jacob didn't just talk like a federal agent. He acted like one. He took command of briefings. He plotted raids on whiteboards. He spoke in confident, clipped phrases that sounded like military training, even though he had none. The police chief admired him. Officers followed him. Town officials shook his hand and thanked him. And residents, the same ones who'd been complaining about drug houses and suspicious comings and goings, finally felt like someone powerful was paying attention. The momentum was instant. Police units, now accompanied by Jacob, began conducting aggressive drug raids, fast entries, tactical sweeps, arrests made quickly. Sometimes the evidence was thin. Sometimes the intelligence came from whispers rather than proof. But people saw action. And action looked like progress. Jacob became something like a local celebrity, not the kind on TV, but the kind who lives in stories whispered over coffee at the diner. That new federal guy is really cleaning this place up. About time someone took this town seriously. It didn't matter that no one knew where he came from. It didn't matter that his badge was always in his pocket, never examined. It didn't matter that no state or federal agency had ever formally introduced him. He looked like the solution, and that was enough. Authority without question. One thing Jacob understood deeply was this: people trust confidence more than credentials. He carried himself like someone with clearance. He used terminology that sounded official. He gave orders like someone who was used to being obeyed. No one asked for paperwork. No one called to verify his identity. No one checked federal databases or agency rosters. The town wanted him to be real, so he was. Officers who had once patrol walked slow, uneventful shifts were suddenly part of dramatic operations. Crime reports spiked, not because crime had increased, but because enforcement had intensified. Jacob made the town feel like a battleground, and himself the soldier who had arrived to win. The small police department couldn't resist the momentum. In a matter of weeks, the stranger had become the center of local law enforcement activity. It was as though he had always been there. Small towns operate on trust, the kind that runs beneath the surface of everyday life. Trust in neighbors, trust in local institutions, trust in authority when it arrives wearing a badge. Jacob didn't need federal documentation to take control of Gerald. He just needed people to believe in the story he told. The police chief believed him. The officers followed him. Residents admired him. Suspects feared him. The town didn't see him as a stranger anymore. They saw him as the man who came to save them. And once a town decides someone is a hero, it becomes very, very hard to see the truth underneath. Because authority, once accepted, is rarely questioned, until something forces the questions to begin. And in Gerald, Missouri, the questions were coming. They just hadn't arrived yet. He didn't need proof. He didn't need rank. He just needed belief. And they gave it to him. For months, Gerald moved under the illusion of order. The new federal operation seemed unstoppable. Every few nights, the quiet Missouri town echoed with the sounds of raids, engines revving, boots pounding, radios blaring. Arrests were made, suspects handcuffed, mug shots taken. On paper, it looked like a triumph. But in the background, something wasn't right. The first signs were small. Paperwork for seized evidence was incomplete. Warrants weren't signed. Confiscated items went missing without documentation. When a county clerk tried to file a report with a supposed task force, no one could find it in any official database. The contact numbers Jakob provided were dead ends, wrong area codes, disconnected lines, no record of any agency by the name he gave. At first, the police chief dismissed these oddities as bureaucratic delays. But doubts started to grow. Officers noticed Jakob's badge looked slightly different from standard federal design. His ID card had no hologram. And when a neighboring jurisdiction asked for coordination, Jakob avoided it entirely, claiming top-secret clearance. The turning point came when a state narcotics agent happened to visit Gerald on unrelated business. When locals mentioned the federal man helping out, the agent was puzzled. There was no record of any operation in the area. Within days, quiet inquiries started at the state level. Names were checked. Databases searched. The result came back clear. No one named Bill Jakob was employed by the DEA, FBI, or any federal task force. Still, Jakob continued leading raids as if nothing had changed. He was confident, calm, and seemingly unaware that suspicion was mounting around him. To the townspeople, he still looked legitimate. To those investigating, he now looked like a ticking time bomb of credibility. Then came the visit from U.S. Marshals. They arrived quietly, walked into the Gerald police station, and asked one simple question: "Where's your federal agent?" Within hours, the illusion shattered. News spread like wildfire through the small community. The man they trusted, the man who'd led dozens of operations, the man who had become their symbol of law and order, was an imposter. He wasn't a decorated officer. He wasn't on a mission from Washington. He was a former insurance salesman from Illinois with no federal ties whatsoever. Shock gave way to disbelief, and disbelief turned into embarrassment. Officers who had followed him felt betrayed. Town officials who had praised him on camera scrambled to explain themselves. Residents, once proud of their federal operation, now realized they had been living inside a stage performance. Jakob was arrested quietly. No dramatic chase, no gunfire, no resistance. The same confidence that had built his illusion was gone. The only sound left was the clicking of handcuffs, this time on him. For Gerald, the aftermath was chaos. Cases that had involved Jakob's participation were thrown into question. Defense attorneys began filing motions to dismiss charges. Evidence collected under his supervision risked being invalidated. And the local police department faced harsh public scrutiny for failing to verify the credentials of a man who had taken command of their operations. Residents who had once called him a hero now argued in diners and gas stations about how it happened. How could we not have known? Didn't anyone check his badge? Why did everyone just believe him? There were no easy answers. Because the truth wasn't just about Jakob's deception. It was about the town's willingness to believe. When the truth about Bill Jakob finally came out, Gerald, Missouri, didn't just lose a man. It lost its sense of certainty. What began as admiration turned into embarrassment, then quiet anger. For months afterward, reporters, federal investigators, and lawyers crowded the same small police department that had once praised Jakob. They weren't asking how many arrests he'd made. They were asking how this could have happened at all. The townspeople's faith in authority was shaken. Every interview, every case report, every radio clip from those months was re-examined. It wasn't only that Jakob had impersonated a federal agent. It was that he'd done it with the town's full cooperation. He had no gun license, no clearance, no training. And yet, for nearly half a year, he had ordered real officers into real raids. The illusion had worked because everyone wanted it to. Gerald's police chief later said, "He looked the part. He spoke the part. We never thought to ask if he was the part." Federal prosecutors spent weeks reconstructing Jakob's path into the town. He had once been an insurance salesman in Illinois, then reinvented himself after personal and financial troubles. He forged federal badges, built a believable backstory, and learned the language of law enforcement by watching and listening. Investigators found no evidence that he profited financially from his impersonation. Instead, it appeared to be about ego, control, and belonging, the desire to be someone important. Psychologists later called it a textbook case of imposter identity syndrome, where individuals construct entire personas to fulfill emotional voids. During interviews, Jakob admitted that at first, he believed he could really make a difference. But as the illusion grew, he couldn't stop. He said it was like acting in a play that the whole town believed in, until the curtain came down. When the case reached court, Jakob faced federal charges for impersonating an officer and illegal possession of weapons. He pled guilty and was sentenced to prison. The courtroom was packed, officers, journalists, and residents all watching the man who had once commanded them now standing silently in handcuffs. Gerald's police department underwent a full internal audit. New verification procedures were introduced, requiring all visiting agents to provide documented credentials directly through state channels. Training sessions were held across Missouri, warning other departments not to rely on appearance or confidence alone. But healing took longer than policy changes. For a long time, residents avoided the subject. Some still defended Jakob, saying he had at least brought discipline and fear of the law. Others felt deeply humiliated. Teachers used the case as an example of critical thinking. Pastors mentioned it in Sunday sermons about discernment and truth. Gerald's small-town innocence, its trust in authority and word of mouth, was gone. It had been replaced with cautious eyes and endless verification. The town learned that trust without proof is not faith, it's a gamble. In prison, Jakob was described as polite, quiet, and remorseful. He read law books, corresponded with reporters, and tried to explain why he did it. He never gave a clear answer. Some said he wanted redemption. Others believed he simply couldn't let go of the identity he had created. Years later, when he was released, he vanished from public view. No interviews, no new scams, no sign of trying to rebuild the persona that once ruled town. Gerald, for its part, slowly faded from national attention, remembered only as the place that let a man walk in with confidence and walk out with their belief. The case of Bill Jakob became a cautionary tale taught in law enforcement seminars across the United States. It reminded officers that credentials must always be verified, no matter how convincing the person. It reminded citizens that authority is not a feeling, it's a fact that must stand up to scrutiny. He didn't steal money. One resident said years later, he stole something harder to get back, our trust. And that is what makes this story so haunting. It isn't just about one man lying. It's about how easily truth can disappear when people stop asking questions.